The sentencing. The grand hall of the Galactic Conclave buzzed with an electric tension. Beams from 1,000 worlds filled the towering amphitheater, their varied forms creating a living tapestry of colors, textures, and bioluminescence. At the center of it all stood a solitary figure, dwarfed by the massive chamber, but radiating an unmistakable aura of defiance. Zara Chen, Earth's most renowned deep space explorer, stood before the assembled judges of the conclave. Her dark eyes swept across the alien faces looming above her, betraying no hint of the fear that gnawed at her insides. She'd faced down solar storms and navigated uncharted black holes, but nothing had prepared her for this moment. Zara Chen of Earth, boomed the voice of High Arbiter Xandrath, its multiple voice boxes creating a disorienting chorus. You stand accused of willfully violating the sovereign territory of the Kulari Dominion, ignoring clear warnings, and endangering galactic peace through your reckless actions. How do you plead? Zara's voice rang out clear and strong, echoing through the cavernous space. Not guilty, your honors. I was on a sanctioned scientific mission. The distress signal we received. Silence. Xandrath's tentacles rippled with agitation. The evidence against you is overwhelming. Sensor logs clearly show your vessel crossing into restricted space. Those logs are falsified, Zara countered, her frustration building. If you'd just allow me to present our own data. A wave of murmurs swept through the assembled dignitaries. Xandrath's eye stalks swiveled towards a cluster of tall, willowy figures whose skin shimmered like oil on water. The Kulari delegation, the word of a primitive species against that of an elder race, sneered Ambassador Zilvax of the Kulari. This farce has gone on long enough. The human's guilt is clear. We demand the maximum sentence. Zara's heart raced. This wasn't a trial. It was a carefully orchestrated show. But why? What could the Kulari possibly gain from framing a human explorer? High Arbiter Xandrath's voice cut through her thoughts. The conclave has reviewed all evidence presented. Zara Chen, we find you guilty of all charges. The chamber erupted in a cacophony of alien voices. Zara stood rooted to the spot, her mind reeling. This couldn't be happening. Order. Order. Xandrath's amplified voice finally quelled the uproar. As per galactic law, the punishment must fit the crime. For endangering the delicate balance of peace, there can be only one sentence. Zara's blood ran cold. She knew what was coming. Exile, Xandrath intoned, to a death world. The amphitheater fell deathly silent. Even among hardened criminals, a death world sentence was rare. It was considered a fate worse than simple execution, a prolonged, agonizing demise on a planet hostile to all known forms of life. Ambassador Zilvax's voice oozed with false concern. Surely, High Arbiter, such a harsh sentence for a misunderstanding. Perhaps a more lenient. The law is clear. Xandrath cut him off. The sentence stands. Zara's mind raced. The Kulari had pushed for her conviction, but now they balked at the punishment. Something wasn't adding up. However, Xandrath continued, in light of the unique circumstances, the conclave will allow the condemned to choose her place of exile from a list of designated death worlds. A holographic display flickered to life before Zara, showcasing a series of nightmarish planets. Acid storms, crushing gravity, atmosphere-devouring nanites. Each world seemed more hellish than the last. Choose wisely, human. Xandrath's voice held a note of what might have been pity. For it will be the last choice you ever make. Zara's eyes scanned the list, her analytical mind already assessing survival chances, no matter how minuscule. One name caught her attention. Nexus 9. Unlike the other worlds with their obvious methods of killing, Nexus 9's entry was maddeningly vague. Extreme environmental instability was all it said. But it was the reactions of the assembled aliens that truly piqued her interest. At the mention of Nexus 9, a ripple of unease passed through the chamber. Even the Kulari ambassador's shimmering skin seemed to pale. I choose Nexus 9, Zora declared, her voice steady. A collective gasp echoed through the grand hall. Xandrat's eye stalks quivered in what might have been surprise. Are you certain, human? Perhaps you'd like to reconsider. I've made my choice, Zora said firmly. Whatever secrets Nexus 9 held, they were enough to rattle even this assembly of advanced beings. And secrets, Zora knew, often held the key to survival. Very well, Xandrat's voice held a hint of, was that respect? Zara Chen of Earth, you are hereby sentenced to lifelong exile on the death world Nexus 9. May whatever gods you believe in have mercy on your soul. As the guards moved to escort her away, Zora caught a glimpse of the Kulari ambassador. Zilvak's expression was unreadable, but the frantic way he whispered to his aides told Zora all she needed to know. She'd thrown a wrench into someone's carefully laid plans. The next few hours passed in a blur. Zora was processed, stripped of all technology, and fitted with a simple envirosuit, her only protection against whatever horrors awaited on Nexus 9. As she was led to the transport ship, a commotion erupted behind her. Wait, a voice called out. Zara turned to see a small avian alien pushing through the crowd. It was Kresia, her co-pilot and friend. Zara, this is madness. You can't. Kresia's words were cut short as guards blocked his path. It's okay, Kree. Zara managed a smile. Take care of the crew, and keep digging. The truth is out there. With a final nod to her friend, Zora boarded the transport. As the ship broke orbit, she gazed out at the glittering expanse of the galactic core. Somewhere out there was Earth, unaware that one of its daughters was about to vanish into the depths of space. The journey to Nexus 9 took several days, during which Zara was kept in solitary confinement. She used the time to mentally prepare, running through survival scenarios, and trying to recall every scrap of information from her years of training. Finally, a harsh klaxon jolted her from fitful sleep. They had arrived. As Zara was escorted to the drop pod, she caught her first glimpse of Nexus 9 through a view screen. Her breath caught in her throat. The planet before her defied description. Its surface seemed to writhe and shift, a kaleidoscope of impossible colors and patterns. In the span of seconds, she witnessed raging firestorms, flash-frozen tundras, and churning oceans, all occupying the same spaces in impossible harmony. What is this place? Zara whispered. The guard, a stoic Vexkar warrior, actually showed a flicker of emotion. Was it pity? Fear? Nexus 9 is an anomaly, the guard said gruffly. A wound in the fabric of space-time. The laws of physics don't work right down there. It's why we use it as a death world. No one survives the Nexus. The planet itself. It changes you. Zara's mind reeled at the implications. A planet where reality itself was in flux. It was a scientist's dream, and a convict's nightmare. As she was sealed into the drop pod, Zora's thoughts turned to Earth, to the family and friends she might never see again. But underneath the fear, a spark of determination ignited. She was Zora Chen, explorer of the unknown. If anyone could survive the impossible, it was her. The pod's engines flared to life. Through the small viewport, Zora watched as the transport ship grew smaller, abandoning her to her fate. With a bone-rattling jolt, the pod entered Nexus 9's atmosphere. Alarms blared as the pod was buffeted by forces that seemed to defy physics. Outside, the sky cycled through impossible colors. One moment, Zara was plummeting through clear blue, the next through roiling storms of purple lightning. The ground rushed up to meet her, or was the ground rushing up to envelop the pod? Reality blurred, and Zara felt her consciousness slipping. As darkness claimed her, one thought burned in Zora's mind. Survive. No matter what, survive. With a thunderous impact, the pod slammed into the surface of Nexus 9. The last sound Zora heard before oblivion took her was the hiss of the airlock opening, exposing her to the chaotic world outside. Zara Chen, sentenced to death, had arrived on a planet that defied the very laws of nature. Her battle for survival, and the unraveling of a galactic conspiracy, was about to begin. Consciousness returned to Zara in waves, each one bringing with it a new assault on her senses. The acrid taste of ozone, the feeling of phantom hands pulling at her skin, the cacophony of sounds that seemed to come from everywhere and nowhere at once. With a Herculean effort, she forced her eyes open. The world that greeted her was wrong. There was no other word for it. The sky above flickered between a deep crimson and a sickly green, occasional tears in the fabric of reality revealing glimpses of star-filled voids. The ground beneath her was a shifting mass of textures, one moment solid rock, the next a writhing sea of microscopic creatures. Zara's scientific mind reeled, trying to process the impossible data her senses were reporting. This couldn't be real. And yet, the ache in her bones and the coppery taste of blood in her mouth told her this was no hallucination. She was alive. Somehow, against all odds, she had survived the landing on Nexus 9. With a groan, Zara pulled herself to her feet, taking stock of her situation. Her envirosuit had activated upon landing, encasing her in a skin-tight layer of adaptive material. It seemed to be holding up against the chaotic environment, for now at least. The drop pod lay in ruins several meters away, split open like an egg. Whatever supplies it might have contained were now scattered to the winds, or whatever passed for wind on this impossible world. "Okay, Zora," she muttered to herself, her voice sounding strange, even through the suit's audio filters. "First things first. Shelter, water, food. The basics don't change, even if everything else has gone insane." She took a tentative step forward, half expecting the ground to swallow her whole. Instead, it merely rippled like water, small eddies forming around her feet before settling back into pseudo-solidity. A sound like distant thunder drew her attention. On the horizon, if such a term even applied here, Zora saw a wall of something approaching. It looked like a storm front, but composed of pure chaos. Where it passed, the landscape was remade, transforming from barren rock to lush jungle to crystalline spires in the span of seconds. "Well," Zara said, a hysterical laugh bubbling up in her throat, "that's not good." She broke into a run, her eyes frantically scanning for any hint of shelter. The undulating ground made every step a challenge. But the alternative, being caught in whatever that reality-warping storm was, spurred her on. As she ran, Zora's mind raced. The Galactic Conclave used this place as a death world. But how? How could they possibly monitor it? How could they be sure no one survived if the very nature of the planet was in constant flux? Her pondering was cut short as the ground beneath her feet suddenly liquefied. Zora plunged into a sea of what looked like mercury, her suit's buoyancy keeping her afloat but unable to make headway against the swirling currents. Panic set in as Zora felt herself being pulled under. The suit's helmet sealed automatically, but how long could it protect her in this impossible ocean? Just as despair began to set in, Zora's hand brushed against something solid. A rock. No, it was too smooth, too regular. With the last of her strength, she pulled herself towards it. It was a pillar rising out of the mercurial sea like a lighthouse. As Zora clung to it, gasping for breath, she realized it wasn't natural. The surface was etched with intricate patterns, glowing faintly with an inner light. "What the hell?" Zora murmured, her scientific curiosity momentarily overriding her fear. This was clearly artificial. But who, or what, could build something stable in this chaos? Her investigation was cut short as the reality storm finally reached her position. The world around Zora exploded into a maelstrom of conflicting physics and impossible geometries. She clung to the pillar for dear life, screwing her eyes shut against the maddening visions assaulting her. For what felt like an eternity, Zora endured. The very atoms of her body seemed to scream in protest as fundamental forces wavered and shifted. Only her iron will and the strange stability of the pillar kept her from being torn apart or remade into something no longer human. And then, as suddenly as it began, it was over. Zara opened her eyes to find herself lying on a rocky plateau. The mercurial sea was gone, replaced by a landscape of twisted spires and pulsating fungi. The pillar she had clung to now stretched towards the sky, its intricate patterns slowly fading. As Zara struggled to her feet, a wave of nausea washed over her. Her suit's medical readouts flashed warnings: elevated heart rate, dangerously high levels of stress hormones, and genetic instability. "That's new," Zara muttered, forcing down her panic. She couldn't afford to fall apart now. Survival came first. Understanding could wait. With unsteady steps, Zara began to explore her new surroundings. The air, thankfully breathable according to her suit's sensors, was thick with spores from the pulsating fungi. Each step released small clouds of the stuff, creating mesmerizing patterns in the air. As she walked, Zara's trained eye began to pick out details. The twisted spires weren't random formations, but the remnants of some ancient structure. Here and there, she spotted more of the etched pillars, always untouched by the chaos around them. "Okay, think," Zara said aloud, her voice helping to ground her in this unreal environment. "Someone built these. Someone found a way to create stability in all this madness. If they could do it, so can I." Her musings were interrupted by a sound that chilled her to the bone. A low, rumbling growl that seemed to come from everywhere at once. Zara froze, her eyes darting around for the source. At first, she saw nothing. Then, a patch of what she had taken for bare rock began to move. It unfolded itself, revealing a creature that defied description. It was as if evolution had taken every predator in Earth's history and combined them into one terrifying package, with a few extra horrors thrown in for good measure. The thing's head, or what passed for a head, swiveled toward Zara. A maw lined with fractal teeth parted in a soul-rending roar. Zara didn't think. She ran. The creature gave chase, its impossible body reconfiguring itself with each bound to better traverse the shifting terrain. Zara's heart pounded in her ears as she pushed herself to her absolute limit, vaulting over obstacles and sliding under low-hanging crystal formations. As she ran, the landscape continued to shift and change. One moment she was sprinting across a field of razor-sharp grass, the next leaping over bubbling pools of acid. The only constants were the relentless pursuit of the creature behind her and the occasional glimpse of those etched pillars. Zara's mind raced as fast as her feet. There had to be a pattern, some logic to the madness. The pillars were key, she was sure of it. But how? As if in answer to her unspoken question, Zara spotted something in the distance. It was hard to make out through the planet's shifting reality, but it looked like a door. Yes, there was no mistaking it now. Set into the side of a cliff that hadn't been there a moment ago was a massive door, its surface covered in the same intricate patterns as the pillars. Zara redoubled her efforts, ignoring the burning in her lungs and the warnings from her suit. The door was her only hope. Behind her, she could hear the creature gaining ground, its roars growing ever closer. Just as Zara reached the door, the ground beneath her feet began to liquefy once more. She lunged forward, her fingers scrabbling for purchase on the door's etched surface. To her amazement, the patterns began to glow at her touch. With a sound like 1,000 tuning forks being struck at once, the door swung open. Zara tumbled through the opening, rolling to a stop on a smooth metal floor. Behind her, she heard the creature's roar of frustration, cut off abruptly as the door slammed shut. For a long moment, Zara simply lay there, gasping for breath. She was alive. Somehow, against all odds, she had survived her first hours on Nexus 9. As her breathing steadied, Zara finally took in her surroundings. She was in a long corridor, its walls made of the same material as the pillars outside. The air was still, free from the chaos that reigned beyond the door. Zara climbed to her feet, wincing at the various aches and pains making themselves known. Her suit had taken a beating, but it was holding together. For now. "All right," she said, her voice echoing slightly in the empty corridor. "What the hell is this place?" As if in response, soft lights began to flicker to life along the walls. They illuminated a series of glyphs, unlike any language Zora had ever encountered in her explorations of the galaxy. And yet, there was something familiar about them. The longer Zora stared, the more she felt she could almost understand their meaning. Cautiously, Zora began to make her way down the corridor. Each step brought new revelations. This wasn't just a shelter, it was a facility of some kind. But built by whom? And for what purpose? The corridor eventually opened up into a vast chamber. Zora's jaw dropped as she took in the sight before her. The room was filled with technology far beyond anything she had ever seen. Holographic displays flickered with data in that strange, almost familiar script. In the center of the room stood a massive machine, its purpose unclear but its importance obvious. As Zora approached the machine, she felt a strange tingling sensation throughout her body. The warnings on her suit's display went haywire for a moment before settling into a steady, pulsing alert. G-nitida Q reconstruction in puro juries, the display read. "What?" Zora whispered, but even as the word left her lips, she could feel the change beginning. It wasn't painful, exactly, but the sensation of her very DNA being rewritten was profoundly unsettling. As the process completed, Zora felt different, stronger, somehow, more in tune with her surroundings. When she looked at the glyphs now, she found she could read them perfectly. "Oh my God," Zora breathed as understanding dawned. This facility, this entire planet, it wasn't a naturally occurring phenomenon at all. It was a testing ground, a place where the very building blocks of reality could be manipulated and reshaped. And now, it seemed, Zora herself had been reshaped to survive in this impossible world. As the implications of her discovery washed over her, Zora's mind raced with questions. Who had built this place? Why had the Galactic Conclave really sent her here? And most importantly, now that she could survive on Nexus 9, what was she going to do about it? One thing was certain. Zora Chen's adventure on the deadliest planet in the galaxy was only just beginning. Unexpected allies. Zora stood in the center of the ancient facility, her mind reeling from the implications of her discovery. The genetic reconstruction she had undergone left her feeling simultaneously exhilarated and terrified. She flexed her fingers, marveling at how even this simple action felt different, more precise, more controlled. "Okay, Zora," she muttered to herself, a habit that was quickly becoming a lifeline in this insane world. "You've survived landing on a death world, outrun a physics-defying monster, and had your DNA rewritten by alien tech. What's next on the agenda?" As if in response to her question, a holographic display flickered to life nearby. Zora approached it cautiously, her newly enhanced mind easily deciphering the complex symbols that danced across the screen. "A map," she breathed, her eyes widening as she took in the scope of what she was seeing. The facility she had stumbled into was vast, stretching for kilometers in every direction, burrowing deep into the planet's crust. And if she was reading this correctly, there were other facilities scattered across Nexus 9's surface. But more intriguing were the life signs the map displayed. Dozens of dots, pulsing with different colors and intensities, scattered throughout the complex. "I'm not alone," Zora realized, a mix of hope and apprehension flooding through her. Were these other survivors, or something else entirely? Before she could ponder further, an alarm blared through the chamber. Red warning lights bathed the room, and a holographic display shifted to show a section of the facility not far from her position. A cluster of dots was moving rapidly, converging on a single pulsing light. Without thinking, Zora sprinted towards the door. Whatever was happening, she couldn't just stand by. If there was even a chance that was another person in trouble, she had to help. As she ran through the twisting corridors, Zora marveled at how her body responded. Her movements were fluid, precise, her reflexes sharper than they had ever been. The genetic reconstruction had done more than just allow her to survive Nexus 9's chaotic environment. It had optimized her for it. She skidded to a halt as she rounded a corner, coming face to face with a scene straight out of a nightmare. A figure, humanoid, but clearly not human, was backed against a wall, surrounded by a pack of creatures that looked like a cross between wolves and insects. Their chitinous exoskeletons gleamed in the flashing red light, mandibles clicking ominously as they closed in on their prey. The humanoid figure clutched some kind of energy weapon, but it was clearly malfunctioning, sparks flying from its casing. Fear radiated from the alien's posture, its four eyes darting frantically between its attackers. Zara's mind raced. She was unarmed, outnumbered, and facing creatures she knew nothing about. Every logical part of her brain screamed at her to retreat, to find a weapon, to come up with a plan. Instead, she charged forward with a yell that surprised even herself. The wolf insects turned at the sound, momentarily distracted from their intended prey. Zara used that split second of confusion to her advantage. She scooped up a piece of debris from the floor, a length of metal that might once have been part of a console, and swung it like a bat at the nearest creature. To her amazement, the blow connected with far more force than she had anticipated. The creature was sent flying, its exoskeleton cracking audibly as it slammed into the wall. The rest of the pack turned on her with terrifying speed, but Zara was already moving. She ducked and weaved, her enhanced reflexes allowing her to stay just ahead of snapping mandibles and slashing claws. Each movement flowed into the next, as if her body was anticipating the creature's attacks before they happened. Out of the corner of her eye, Zara saw the alien she had come to rescue fumbling with its weapon, the power cell. She shouted, ducking under another attack. It's misaligned. Whether the alien understood her words or just her intent, it seemed to get the message. With trembling hands, it popped open a panel on the weapon and made a quick adjustment. The corridor lit up with a burst of plasma energy, the smell of ozone filling the air as one of the wolf insects disintegrated. The rest of the pack turned tail and fled, their clicking calls echoing down the hallway. For a moment, silence reigned. Zara stood there, breathing heavily, her impromptu weapon still clutched in her hands. Slowly, she turned to face the alien she had rescued. Zara realized, was regarding Zara with a mixture of awe and suspicion. The alien's four eyes blinked in an unsettling rhythm, and when she spoke, it was in a melodious language unlike anything Zara had ever heard. To her shock, Zara found she could understand it perfectly. You are not like the others," the alien said, her voice filled with wonder. "What are you?" Zara lowered her makeshift weapon slowly. "My name is Zora Chen. I'm human, or at least I was. I'm not entirely sure what I am now." She gestured around them. "Do you know what this place is? What's happening here?" The alien's eyes widened. "A human? Impossible. No human has ever survived Nexus 9. She paused, seeming to consider her next words carefully. "I am Lysithea, last surviving member of the Arcturian scientific expedition. Or so I thought." She holstered her weapon, her posture relaxing slightly. "As for what this place is, it is a nightmare, a prison, and a laboratory, all in one." Zara's mind spun with questions, but before she could voice any of them, another alarm blared through the facility. This one was different, more urgent, more frantic. Lysithea's face paled, her skin taking on a sickly blue tinge. "No," she whispered. "Not now. Not when I'm so close." "Close to what?" Zara demanded. "What's happening?" "Reality shift," Lysithea said, already moving down the corridor. "This section of the facility is about to be reclaimed by the chaos. If we don't reach a stabilized zone soon, we'll be torn apart at the molecular level." Zara didn't need to be told twice. She fell into step beside Lysithea, matching the alien's frantic pace. "I take it you've been here a while," she said as they ran. "How long?" Lysithea's laugh was bitter. Time has little meaning on Nexus 9. Cycles, perhaps. Hundreds of them. I've seen countless others arrive, only to be consumed by the planet or driven mad by its impossibilities. They rounded a corner, only to find their path blocked by a wall of shimmering energy. Beyond it, Zara could see the corridor twisting and warping, reality itself coming apart at the seams. "No," Lysithea cried, pounding her fists against the energy barrier. "The containment protocols have already begun. We're trapped." Zara's eyes darted around, searching for anything that might help. Her gaze fell on a control panel near the barrier, its symbols pulsing with an urgent rhythm. Without fully understanding how, Zara knew what she had to do. Her hands flew over the controls, inputting a complex sequence that she somehow, impossibly, knew by heart. The barrier flickered and died just as the wave of chaotic energy reached their position. Zara grabbed Lysithea's arm and pulled her through, sealing the barrier behind them just in time. They collapsed to the floor, gasping for breath as the sounds of reality tearing itself apart raged on the other side of the energy field. Lysithea stared at Zara in disbelief. How did you do that? Those controls should have been incomprehensible to you." Zara shook her head, equally bewildered. "I don't know. Ever since I arrived, it's like I'm tapping into some kind of knowledge I never knew I had." She met Lysithea's gaze. "What's happening to me?" The alien was silent for a long moment, her four eyes studying Zara intently. Finally, she spoke, her voice filled with a mixture of awe and fear. "You've been changed. Nexus 9 has remade you, just as it has remade countless others. But you're different. You're adapting in a way I've never seen before." Zara climbed to her feet, offering a hand to help Lysithea up. "I need answers," she said firmly. "You've been here longer than anyone. What is this place really? Why are we here?" Lysithea sighed, a sound that seemed to carry the weight of countless years. "Come," she said, gesturing down the corridor. "There's something you need to see." As they walked, Lysithea began to explain. Nexus 9 is not a natural phenomenon. It's a construct, a planet-sized laboratory created by a species so ancient they've passed into legend. The precursors, we call them. "What were they studying?" Zara asked, her scientific curiosity piqued despite the dire circumstances. "Everything," Lysithea replied. "The nature of reality itself, the fundamentals of existence. They sought to unlock the secrets of the universe, to rewrite the very laws of physics." She shook her head. But something went wrong. Their experiments spiraled out of control, creating a cascading effect that turned Nexus 9 into what it is now, a world of perpetual chaos, where the fabric of reality is constantly being torn apart and remade. They arrived at a vast chamber, dominated by a massive, pulsating crystal suspended in a field of energy. Holographic displays surrounded it, showing data streams that boggled the mind. "This," Lysithea said, her voice hushed, "is the heart of Nexus 9, the nexus point from which the planet draws its power and its curse." Zara approached the crystal, drawn to it in a way she couldn't explain. As she neared, the data streams seemed to shift, responding to her presence. "The precursors are long gone," Lysithea continued, "but their creations linger. The facility's automated systems continue their work, endlessly experimenting, recombining, seeking to fulfill their original purpose." "And we're what?" Zara asked, turning back to face the alien. "Lab rats." Lysithea nodded grimly. "Precisely. Every being sent here becomes part of the experiment. Most don't survive. Those that do are changed, altered by the planet's chaotic energies and the precursor's technology." Zara's mind raced, connecting the dots. The Galactic Conclave. They know about this place. They're not just using it as a death world, are they? They're deliberately sending people here. Why? Power, Lysithea said simply. The secrets locked away in Nexus 9 could reshape the galaxy. Whoever controls this place controls the future of all sapient life. Her eyes narrowed. But the Conclave is playing with forces they don't understand. They think they can control Nexus 9, harness its power. They're fools. Zara's fists clenched at her sides. So what do we do? How do we stop this? Lysithia's laugh was hollow. Stop it. My dear human, I've been trying to do that for longer than you can imagine. I've seen civilizations rise and fall, watched countless beings be consumed by this cursed world. What makes you think you can succeed where so many have failed? Zara turned back to the crystal, watching as the data streams continued to shift and pulse in response to her presence. She felt something stirring deep within her, a connection to this impossible place that she was only beginning to understand. Because, she said softly, her voice filled with a determination that surprised even her, I'm not like the others. You said it yourself. I'm adapting in ways you've never seen before. She met Lysithia's gaze, her eyes blazing with purpose. I was sent here to die, but instead, I'm going to find a way to end this, to free everyone trapped here and expose the truth to the galaxy. For the first time since they'd met, a flicker of hope appeared in Lysithia's alien features. You truly believe that's possible? Zara nodded, a plan already forming in her mind. It won't be easy, and we can't do it alone. There are others out there, aren't there? Other survivors. Yes, Lysithia confirmed. Scattered throughout the facility and across the planet's surface. But reaching them, convincing them to work together, it's a monumental task. A smile spread across Zora's face, the first genuine one since she'd arrived on this impossible world. Then we'd better get started. Nexus 9 wanted to remake us. Fine. Let's show it, and the galaxy, exactly what we've become. As if in response to her words, the crystal pulsed with newfound intensity. The chamber hummed with energy, and for a brief moment, Zara felt as if she could see the entirety of Nexus 9 laid out before her, a world of infinite possibility, waiting to be reshaped. The battle for survival had only been the beginning. Now, the real challenge lay ahead. To unite the survivors, unravel the secrets of the precursors, and find a way to bring order to the chaos of Nexus 9. Zara Chen, once a simple explorer from Earth, now stood at the precipice of a journey that would change the fate of the galaxy forever. And she was ready to face whatever impossible challenges lay ahead. The hidden truth. The days that followed Zara's declaration were a whirlwind of activity. With Lysithia's knowledge of Nexus 9's ever-shifting landscape and Zara's inexplicable ability to interface with the ancient technology, they began the arduous task of locating and contacting other survivors. It wasn't easy. Nexus 9's chaotic nature meant that communication was spotty at best and entirely impossible at worst. More than once, Zara and Lysithia found themselves racing against time, trying to reach a group of survivors before another reality shift could sweep them away. But slowly, surely, their numbers grew. A Volcran warrior with skin like living stone, a pair of Gelic scientists, their tentacles constantly in motion as they worked to decipher the precursor's technology, a being of pure energy that called itself Omega, claiming to be the last of a species long thought extinct. Each new ally brought their own skills, their own perspective on the nightmare that was Nexus 9, and each of them looked to Zara with a mixture of hope and skepticism. She was, after all, the impossibility, a human not just surviving, but thriving in the depths of the deadliest world in the galaxy. As their makeshift coalition grew, so did Zora's understanding of her newfound abilities. She found she could sense the ebb and flow of Nexus 9's chaotic energies, predicting reality shifts with uncanny accuracy. Her mind seemed to expand, absorbing and processing information at a rate that would have been impossible for a normal human. But with this growth came disturbing questions. Who was she becoming? And at what cost? It was Lysithia who finally voiced the concern that had been gnawing at all of them. Zara, she said one day, her four eyes blinking in that unsettling rhythm, we need to talk about what's happening to you. They were in what they had begun calling the hub, a vast chamber deep within the facility that seemed to be more stable than the surrounding areas. Holographic displays flickered around them, showing the status of their growing network of allies and the ever-shifting landscape of Nexus 9. Zara turned from the display she had been studying, raising an eyebrow at the Arcturian. "What do you mean?" Lizithia gestured to the surrounding technology. "You're interfacing with these systems in ways that should be impossible. Your genetic structure is continuing to alter, adapt. I've been monitoring the changes, and..." She hesitated. "And what?" Zora prompted, a knot of unease forming in her stomach. "And I'm not sure how much of you is still human," Lysithea finished quietly. The words hung in the air between them, heavy with implication. Zara opened her mouth to protest, to assert her humanity, but found she couldn't. Because deep down, she knew Lysithea was right. She no longer needed sleep, sustaining herself on the ambient energy of Nexus 9 itself. Her thoughts moved at lightning speed, processing complex equations and multidimensional concepts as easily as breathing. And sometimes, in quiet moments, she could swear she felt the planet itself, not as an external force, but as an extension of her own being. "What am I becoming?" Zara whispered, more to herself than to Lysithea. Before the Arcturian could respond, an alarm blared through the hub. One of the holographic displays expanded, showing a section of the facility they had thought abandoned. "Life signs detected," the Geelic twins announced in unison, their tentacles flying over the controls. "Multiple signatures, and some kind of energy buildup." Zara's eyes narrowed as she studied the readout. "That's not a natural phenomenon," she said, her voice tight. "Someone's opened a portal. We're being invaded." The hub erupted into a flurry of activity. The Volcran warrior, Karg, immediately began organizing their defenses. Omega's energy form pulsed with agitation, already plotting the fastest route to the incursion point. But Zara held up a hand, silencing them all. "Wait," she said, her eyes unfocused as she concentrated on something only she could sense. This isn't right. The energy signature, it's familiar somehow." And then it hit her. The realization sent a jolt through her system, a mixture of anger and vindication. "It's the Galactic Conclave," she announced, her voice hard. "They found a way to breach Nexus 9's defenses." A hush fell over the assembled beings. They all knew what this meant. The Conclave wasn't here to rescue them. They were here to protect their secret, to ensure that the truth of Nexus 9 never reached the outside world. "We need to move," Zara said, already heading for the exit. "If we can capture one of them, force them to take us back through their portal." "It's suicide," Carr grumbled, his stony features set in a grimace. "We don't know their numbers, their capabilities. We should fortify our position, wait them out." Zara shook her head. "We might not get another chance. This is our ticket out of here, our opportunity to expose the truth to the galaxy." She looked around at the faces of her unlikely allies, beings from across the cosmos, united by their shared ordeal and their trust in her. "I know I'm asking a lot," she said softly, "but we've come too far to give up now. Who's with me?" One by one, they nodded their assent. Even Karg, after a moment's hesitation, gave a resigned shrug. "Into battle we go," he growled. As they made their way through the twisting corridors of the facility, Zora's mind raced. This was the moment of truth. Everything they had endured, everything they had discovered about Nexus 9, and its impossible nature, it all came down to this. They arrived at the incursion point just as another group of Conclave soldiers emerged from the shimmering portal. Zara's enhanced senses took in every detail in a split second. The advanced weaponry, the fear in their eyes as they gazed upon the chaotic landscape of Nexus 9, the determination in their stance. "Now," Zara shouted, and her Ragdig team sprang into action. The battle that followed was unlike anything the galaxy had ever seen. Karg's stone-like body deflected energy blasts as he waded into the fray, his massive fists sending Conclave soldiers flying. The Zealot twins moved in perfect synchronization, their tentacles manipulating the very fabric of reality to confuse and disorient their foes. Omega became a living weapon, its energy form engulfing soldiers and short-circuiting their equipment. Lysithea proved herself a crack shot with her salvaged weapon, picking off targets with surgical precision. And Zora was everywhere at once. She moved with impossible speed, her body flowing like water through the chaos of battle. With every passing moment, she felt her connection to Nexus 9 growing stronger, the planet's energies surging through her. As the fight raged on, Zora found herself face to face with the Conclave commander, a tall, willowy being with eyes that glowed with barely contained power. Recognition flashed across the alien's features. "Impossible," it hissed. "You're the human. You should be dead." Zora's lips curled into a humorless smile. "Sorry to disappoint," she said, her voice eerily calm. "Now, why don't you tell me what the Conclave is really up to here?" The commander's response was to raise its weapon, but Zora was already moving. With a thought, she tapped into Nexus 9's chaotic energies, bending the very air around them. The commander's shot went wide, and before it could recover, Zora was upon it. They grappled, tumbling through the swirling vortex of the still-open portal. For a heart-stopping moment, Zora felt herself being torn apart, her very atoms screaming in protest as they were pulled between two realities. And then, with a thunderous crash, they landed. Zora rolled to her feet, her eyes widening as she took in her surroundings. They were in some kind of control room, sleek and sterile, a far cry from the chaotic landscape of Nexus 9. "Zora," Lysithea's voice crackled through the communicator they had cobbled together. "Are you all right? What's happening?" I'm off-world," Zora replied, her voice filled with wonder. "I think I'm on a Conclave ship." Before she could say more, the commander lunged at her again. But Zora was ready. With a grace that belied her human origins, she sidestepped the attack, using the alien's own momentum to slam it into a nearby console. Alarms blared as the impact triggered something in the ship's systems. Holographic displays sprang to life all around them, and Zora felt her breath catch in her throat as she saw what they revealed. It wasn't just Nexus 9. There were other worlds, dozens of them, scattered across the galaxy. Each one a testing ground, a crucible where the Conclave sent those they deemed expendable in their quest for power. "My God," Zora whispered, "it's bigger than we ever imagined." The commander, seeing the horror on Zora's face, let out a bitter laugh. "You understand nothing," it spat. "The power contained in these worlds, it's the key to reshaping the galaxy, to ascending beyond the limitations of physical form." Zora's mind reeled as she processed the implications. The Conclave wasn't just experimenting on a handful of condemned prisoners. They were playing with the lives of entire species, entire worlds. "Why?" she demanded, her voice shaking with fury. "How can you justify this?" The commander's eyes blazed with fanatical light. "For the greater good," it said. "A few must suffer so that all may transcend. It is the way off." Its words were cut off as another alarm blared through the ship. On one of the displays, Zora saw a familiar sight, the swirling, chaotic energies of a reality shift. But this wasn't happening on Nexus 9. It was happening here, on the Conclave ship. Understanding dawned on Zora with terrifying clarity. In their arrogance, the Conclave had thought they could control the power of the precursors, but they had underestimated the true nature of what they were dealing with. They hadn't just opened a portal to Nexus 9. They had invited its chaos into their own realm. As reality began to warp around them, Zora made a split-second decision. She lunged for the ship's controls, her enhanced mind interfacing with the alien technology as easily as breathing. "Lysithea," she shouted into her communicator, "I'm bringing you through. All of you. Get ready." With a thought, she reactivated the portal. But this time, she wasn't just opening a door between 2 points in space. She was channeling the full power of Nexus 9, using her newfound connection to the planet to bridge the gap between worlds. The air shimmered and tore as Lysithea, Karg, the Galactic twins, Omega, and the rest of their unlikely allies stepped through. They arrived just in time to see the Conclave ship beginning to break apart, reality itself rebelling against the hubris of those who thought they could control it. "We need to go," Zura said, her voice steady despite the chaos erupting around them. "There's an escape pod bay 2 levels down, if we hurry." Her words were drowned out by the sound of tearing metal as a section of the ship's hull was ripped away. Through the breach, they could see the swirling void of space, and beyond it, the looming presence of Nexus 9, no longer contained, its chaotic energies reaching out to reclaim what had been taken. As they raced through the disintegrating ship, dodging falling debris and pockets of warped spacetime, Zora's mind was already racing ahead. They had the truth now, proof of the Conclave's crimes, of the existence of other worlds like Nexus 9. But getting that truth to the galaxy at large wouldn't be easy. The Conclave's influence ran deep, and there would be those who would stop at nothing to keep their secrets buried. Yet as she looked at the determined faces of her companions, beings from across the cosmos, united in their struggle to survive the impossible, Zara felt a surge of hope. They had defied death on the deadliest planet in the galaxy. They had uncovered a conspiracy that spanned worlds. And now, they stood on the precipice of a revelation that could reshape the very foundations of galactic society. Whatever challenges lay ahead, Zara knew one thing for certain. The real battle was just beginning. As they piled into the escape pod, leaving behind the dying Conclave ship and the chaos of Nexus 9, Zora allowed herself a small smile. The galaxy thought it had sentenced her to death. Instead, it had given her a purpose, defiance, and triumph. The escape pod hurtled through space, leaving behind the disintegrating Conclave ship and the ominous presence of Nexus 9. Inside, Zara and her unlikely band of allies huddled together, their breath fogging the small viewports as they watched the chaos recede into the distance. "We made it," Lysithea whispered, her 4 eyes blinking rapidly in what Zara had come to recognize as an expression of disbelief. "We're actually free." But Zara knew their ordeal was far from over. "We're alive," she corrected gently, "but we're not free yet. Not while the Conclave still holds power, not while there are other worlds out there suffering like Nexus 9. She turned to face her companions, beings from across the galaxy united by their shared struggle. "We have the truth now," she continued, her voice steady and determined. "We know about the other prison worlds, about the Conclave's experiments. The question is, what do we do with that knowledge?" Karg, the Volcran warrior, rumbled deep in his stone-like chest. "We fight," he said simply. "We take the battle to the Conclave, make them pay for what they've done." The Galactic twins chittered in agreement, their tentacles intertwining in a gesture of solidarity. But Omega, its energy form pulsing with concern, offered a note of caution. "The Conclave's influence runs deep," it said, its voice a melodious hum. "They control vast swaths of the galaxy. How can we hope to stand against such power?" Zara smiled, a plan already forming in her mind. "We don't fight them head-on," she said. "We do what we did on Nexus 9. We adapt. We survive. And we turn their own weapons against them." Over the next few hours, as the escape pod drifted through the vastness of space, Zara outlined her plan. They would need to split up, each of them taking the evidence they'd gathered to different corners of the galaxy. They would seek out those who had been wronged by the Conclave, species and worlds that had suffered under their rule. "We build a coalition," Zara explained, her eyes shining with purpose. "Not just of soldiers, but of scientists, diplomats, anyone who can help us unravel the Precursor's technology and expose the Conclave's crimes." It was an audacious plan, fraught with danger. But as Zora looked at the faces of her companions, she saw not fear, but determination. They had survived the impossible together. Now, they were ready to change the galaxy. As the escape pod systems detected a habitable world within range, Zara felt a sudden wave of vertigo wash over her. She stumbled, steadying herself against the wall as strange visions flashed through her mind. She saw glimpses of possible futures, worlds freed from the Conclave's grip, species rising up in defiance, the secrets of the precursors unlocked and used for the benefit of all. But she also saw darker possibilities, the Conclave's experiments spiraling out of control, reality itself fracturing under the strain of unchecked power. "Zara?" Lysithia's concerned voice broke through the visions. "Are you all right?" Zara blinked, the images fading but leaving behind a profound sense of both hope and urgency. "I'm fine," she said, straightening up, just seeing things more clearly now. As they prepared to land on the unknown world before them, Zara knew that her connection to Nexus 9 had changed her in ways she was only beginning to understand. But rather than fear this change, she embraced it. She would need every advantage in the fight to come. The months that followed were a whirlwind of activity. True to their plan, Zara and her allies scattered across the galaxy, each taking a piece of the evidence they'd gathered from the Conclave ship. Zara found herself moving from world to world, always one step ahead of the Conclave's agents. She spoke to underground resistance movements, to disillusioned government officials, to anyone who would listen. Slowly but surely, a network began to form. But it wasn't just about gathering allies. Zara's unique connection to the Precursor's technology allowed her to make breakthroughs that had eluded others for millennia. With each passing day, she unraveled more of the mysteries behind Nexus 9 and the other prison worlds. She learned to harness the chaotic energies that had nearly destroyed her, using them to heal wounds that should have been fatal, to bridge vast distances in the blink of an eye. But with this growing power came a growing concern. Was she still human? And if not, what was she becoming? These questions weighed heavily on Zara's mind as she stood before the assembled representatives of what they had come to call the Galactic Liberation Front. It had been a year since their escape from Nexus 9. And now, finally, they were ready to make their move against the Conclave. "We've gathered irrefutable evidence of the Conclave's crimes," Zara began, her voice carrying easily through the vast chamber. "We've located 17 other prison worlds like Nexus 9, each one a testament to the Conclave's cruelty and hubris." Holographic displays sprang to life around her, showing the faces of countless beings who had suffered under the Conclave's rule. "But we've also discovered something else," Zara continued. "The Precursor's technology. It was never meant to be a weapon. It was meant to be a tool for understanding, for growth." She held up her hand, allowing tendrils of energy to dance between her fingers. Many in the audience gasped, but Zara pressed on. "What was done to us on Nexus 9, what's being done to countless others across the galaxy? It's a perversion of the Precursor's work. But we can set it right." As Zara outlined their plan of attack, she could see the mix of hope and fear on the faces before her. They were putting everything on the line, risking their lives, and the lives of their peoples on the word of a human who was, perhaps, no longer entirely human. But as the meeting concluded, and the various factions broke off to prepare for the coming conflict, Zara felt a hand on her shoulder. She turned to see Lysithia, the Arcturian's eyes shimmering with an emotion Zara couldn't quite place. "I've been studying you," Lysithia said softly. "The changes in your genetic structure, your growing abilities. Zara, I don't think you realize just how significant you've become." Zara frowned. "What do you mean?" Lysithia's voice was filled with awe. "You're not just adapting to the Precursor's technology. You're evolving beyond it. The data suggests that you might be the key to unlocking the full potential of their work, not just for yourself, but for everyone." The implications of Lysithia's words hit Zara like a physical blow. Could it be true? Was she not just a survivor, but the culmination of the Precursor's grand experiment? Before she could fully process this revelation, alarms blared throughout the base. The Conclave had found them. The battle that followed would be remembered for generations to come. The Conclave, in their desperation to maintain control, unleashed weapons of terrifying power. Entire star systems were engulfed in reality warping fields. Planets were torn asunder by forces that defied the laws of physics. But for every horror the Conclave unleashed, the Liberation Front had an answer. Guided by Zora's growing understanding of the Precursor's technology, they were able to counter each attack, to protect the innocent and strike back at the heart of the Conclave's power. And at the center of it all was Zora herself. She moved across the battlefield like a force of nature, her body glowing with otherworldly energy as she faced down the most powerful members of the Conclave. In the final, climactic battle, Zora found herself face to face with the supreme arbiter of the Conclave, the very being who had sentenced her to die on Nexus 9. But now, the tables had turned.